Oye, mi gente, Dímelo, mi gente. Welcome back to the third season of Oye, mi gente podcast. Thank you so much for sticking with us. This is Viv Moran. I'm a multimedia artist from South Jamaica, Queens, and your favorite tia. At this moment, I would like to start us off with our daily affirmation. I want to invite you all, my beautiful gods and goddesses who tune in every week. And if this is your first time listening, welcome. I invite you to join in as well. Affirmation. I have the power to create change. Now that we have charged our inner spirit crystals, let's welcome our guest, Angy Rivera of Ask Angy. Angy Rivera, a Colombian immigrant, is the co-executive director at the New York State Youth Leadership Council, an undocumented youth-led organization fighting for immigrant justice through leadership, development, and community organizing. Rivera graduated from CUNY John Jay College of Criminal Justice, obtaining a degree in culture and community studies while minoring in human services. Rivera created Ask Angy, an award-winning undocumented immigrant online advice column. In 2012, Rivera met documentary maker Michaela Schwer, who filmed her and her family from the film No Digas, Nadie, Don't Tell Anyone. The Peabody Award-winning documentary, which aired on PBS in 2015, navigates the difficult reality and double silence Rivera experiences as an undocumented immigrant and survivor of sexual assault. In 2012, she was recognized as one of the Hispanic Coalition New York's 40 Under 40 Rising Stars. She has been awarded scholarships from the New York Civil Libraries Union and the CUNY Institute of Mexican Studies. In 2016, she received the American Immigration Council's Immigrant Youth Achievement Award for her dedication to immigrant justice. She has been featured in the New York Times, Latina Magazine, Teaching Tolerance, New York Magazine, and Maroon 5's recent Girls Like You music video, among others. Follow her work on social media at Ask Angy. Today, immigrants make up approximately 13.5% of the total U.S. population. From 1900s to 1930, immigrants made up between 12% and 15% of the population. And similar spikes occurred in the 1850s and 1880s. During those periods, immigrants successfully became part of the U.S. society, helping to build the thriving and diverse country we have now. And there's no reason to believe that today's immigrants will be any different. Currently, there are over 11 million undocumented immigrants living in the United States. Out of those 11 million, 1 million are under 18 and 4 million under 30 years old. I want to also remind everyone that under Obama's presidency, more than 400,000 undocumented immigrants were deported, the highest number in the nation's history. Families are continuing to be separated today. Hi, Angy.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. How are you?
I'm good, a little sleepy.
Same. How are you feeling?
I struggle a lot in the winter, so I just want to be warm in a bed.
For real. There's the thing that they called seasonal depression.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I feel you on that. How's your spirit?
My spirit is okay right now, actually.
Okay.
I'm glad.
So to start the interview, I would like to offer you to take a deep breath with me. This interview may get a bit heavy, and I want to make sure that I'm able to hold space for the feelings as well. Ready?
Yeah.
Take a deep breath. Okay, let's start. Let's go back to your parents' story. Where are they from?
My parents are from Colombia. My mom was born in Colombia. And she was born in like the countryside, so a lot of mountain and farms, nature.
That's beautiful. And how was her life before migrating to the U.S.?
I think before migrating to the United States, it was difficult for her growing up. She struggled with a lot of poverty and violence in the rural areas of Colombia, so she had to hustle her way a lot through school and working jobs since she was little. There was also a lot of gender-based violence in her community and family growing up. And my mom had me at a young age, so it made things even more difficult for her because now she was navigating all of these issues with a baby. And she was a young person, she was 19, so it was hard.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, like, your life is like just beginning, and then to even like living in poverty and then with a child, you want to give your child the best chances in life.
Right. Yeah, and sometimes like we do this thing to young parents that if we make things harder for them, they'll realize what it's like to be a parent or like punish them for being young parents. So my family, instead of making things easier for her, would like make it harder.
Yeah, I can imagine. There's definitely like a double standard because some of our grandparents had our parents really, really young.
Right.
So
Exactly.
when we tell them that, they're like, "Oh, but life was different back then."
Yeah,
But
and there's yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
and there's always this also sentiment that there's never a right time to be a parent.
Yeah.
Older folks say that, but and never, the same respect is never applied to young people.
Definitely, because nobody has the handbook on how to be a parent. When is the
Exactly.
best time to be a parent? And there's definitely a double standard in that. When did she migrate? How was that journey?
She came to the United States. I think one time without me. So in 1992 maybe, 93. And then she went back and got me, and then we came together in 94.
Gotcha. Has she spoken to you about like what pushed her to make that decision to leave everything behind?
Well, I think she often says like the typical immigrant things of wanting a better life, wanting better opportunities, things being really difficult for us in Colombia. And she had some friends and some contacts here in Queens, New York, that told her would help her find a job and settle in. So it was a mixture of a lot of different factors, from the war and drugs and all that in Colombia to having friends here that would help. And then my father wasn't in the picture, so it was, a lot of like a catalyst to push her to seek out better opportunities.
Yeah. How was her experience upon arrival? Like, has she ever like dug deep on like, because like when we're kids, we don't really either see or like understand too much, because also now our parents don't really like to talk about like how they've been spoken to. So has she ever talked to you about that, like her real experience?
Yeah, I mean, she would share with me how difficult it was to find a place to live, because she didn't have furniture, she didn't have a lot of connections, and she didn't speak the language yet. So and this was before I could translate for us. So a lot of homesickness. She tells me that the first few years were really hard for her because she was all alone, and most of her family's not here. So it was a lot of isolation and hard time finding resources. And I think one of the few communities that we had growing up was the church. Because usually they have a lot of community things for the holidays, and that created like a sense of community and family that was missing.
Yeah. There's definitely like the 50-50 of how the church definitely is one of the biggest supporters of immigrants, and they definitely do open their doors to try their best to help out.
Yeah. I mean, they can always do better, but
No, yeah, of course.
but for sure, that was like one of the spaces that we had.
Yeah. How was it for you growing up?
So I think for me it was difficult too. It took me some time until I was able to learn English. And I think once I knew just the basics, my mom wanted me to interpret everything. And so, it was, it creates this weird, like, power dynamic. And my siblings were born here. My brothers were born a little bit after we migrated. And so I had to help out a lot around the house, and it often made it stressful for me because I just wanted to be a kid, but it felt like I was having, a different childhood than other kids. I had to hold,
like almost being a second parent, huh?
Yeah, like being a parent, and because it's hard to afford daycare, it's hard to all these things, so you want your kids to help out, and holding the weight of what it means to be undocumented, and always being reminded not to tell anybody, not to share that with anyone. And trying to do your best to make sure that their sacrifices are worth it. So I would often excel in school, but from a place of stress and worthiness, and not just because I like learning, So it was, there's a lot of different stressors.
And how was it learning the language? I mean, obviously as a child it might be easier, right?
It was and it wasn't. At the time, there weren't all these dual language programs that we know now. I think the bilingual education that I received back then, it was very focused on assimilation narratives. You have to learn English and stop speaking Spanish. You're in America now, and I would hear that a lot from my teachers. And so it was a constant battle, because then I would go home and I wasn't allowed to speak English. And my mom wanted me to speak Spanish, to read Spanish, write Spanish, watch TV in Spanish. And then, so, I was learning both languages. I was learning Spanish at home, and then trying to learn English in school so I could survive. And it wasn't something that, the way it is now, right now we have dual language programs, and it's always encouraged for kids to know another language. Back then, I think it was more shameful.
Definitely. So now, because you had to pretty much go through these almost assimilation courses in school and learning English, how do you think that would have been for your mom? Because the comment that most of these Americans have is, you need to learn English, and your mom was what, her early 20s?
Yeah, she was in her early 20s.
Yeah. So if it was 50-50 for you, how do you think it would have been for your mom to now attempt to go through these courses?
Yeah, I mean, for her, it was also difficult. She would take some English classes and had tried to get her GED in the past. And so, it was hard finding resources that were available to her, also that were sensitive about time. And she was also working oftentimes more than one job to try to support us. And so, and we were living in Queens, where a lot of people speak Spanish from the church people to work, to people in the community, people in the bodegas. So it doesn't immediately feel like a urgent thing. Because, you know, I would, you could talk to your neighbors and other people.
Yeah, I feel like also like when our parents decide to migrate, I think the neighborhoods we land in are also a huge help because, you know, like your experience, you know, your mom still had support from the community in a way where she was comfortable enough to speak her own language.
Right.
You know, and then where we landed, I'm from South Jamaica, Queens, and South Jamaica, Queens is predominantly Black. So, you know, we didn't speak Spanish as much, but luckily for us, you know, my dad's friends from Peru, they literally lived within the same block, that 1 block radius. But from that, you know, like I also remember helping my mom with her like English homework because, you know, she felt if she couldn't speak the language, she wasn't able to help us, you know, with our studies, which I can imagine how difficult it is or was for your mom.
Yeah, we had to go through a lot of those language issues too. I would sometimes translate my entire homework into Spanish, do it in Spanish, translate it back into English, because none of us understood what was going on, and a lot of the homework helplines were for English speakers.
So pretty much you carried a lot on your shoulders, especially being the firstborn.
Yeah, and there's like my therapist one time called it that my mom and I were living parallel lives because we had migrated together and it felt like we had each other, right? And in this whole country. And so it often felt like if anything, she got it, right? She got me, we got each other. From the interpreting to the doing things at home to like getting here in the first place. It was a lot of that, like depending on each other.
Could you say it was more like parenting each other?
For sure. I mean, for sure, parenting each other. I was helping her navigate this country, and we were young, you know, she was young too. And to this day, you know, I still support her with like health stuff and work stuff and immigration paperwork, and I still serve as a bridge.
Yeah, I know that definitely has to be hard because even now, like I'm about to be 33 years old, and me and my mom and my sister, we've been here for about 30 years. We're going to be 30 years, and I still help her navigate through things, or she's like, how do you say this? And I have to, you know, often correct her because now my sister also has like a kid, and I have to tell my mom, like, you need to, you know, I hate correcting people on how to pronounce certain things. But now with my niece, who's now learning how to speak properly, and you can tell that she has a little bit of a speech impairment, and I feel incredibly bad to tell my mom, like, no, you can't say it that way, because she is now learning to say it that way, and she needs to be able to say it properly so she can also be understood.
Right. Yeah, and it's hard. It's hard navigating that because you don't want to make folks feel ashamed for how they speak or their accent or pronunciation. And I saw my siblings grow up with this a lot because, you know, they were born here. And by the time that they were old enough, my mom and I kind of spoke English already. And they would go to school and would have trouble reading or writing because of the disability aspect, but also the bilingualism that wasn't welcome so much in school. I saw them struggle, to like pronounce words that were in Spanish or pronounce words that were in English. And the teachers oftentimes would just say like, "Oh, stick to one language," because it was never like an effort to cultivate, right, and to teach maybe in a different way. But I saw them a lot more struggle with that because English was a language now that was spoken at home.
And how was parent-teacher conference like for you?
Oh, I had to interpret all of it.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. I think now there's a lot more efforts to send, like, paperwork home in different languages and all this stuff. But I know back then I had to go with her to interpret the meetings, the report cards, the conversations with the teachers.
Yo, I can only imagine how difficult it was. Like, if you were, like, punished, how do you tell your parent you were punished because of XYZ?
Right. Yeah, and having to, like, tell my mom that I was talking too much in school. That was, like, the comments that were on my report card.
Oh, my God.
That was always my thing.
I feel like every immigrant child or child of immigrant can relate to that, because that was my story too. Like, oh, Vivian is such a smart girl, but she talks too much.
Yeah. Once I was able to understand people, it was over.
Yo, for real. Like, pre-K for me was like super difficult. I never talked. All I did was paint. And that's how I communicated, through paint. So if I was sad, my pictures would be sad. If I was happy, my pictures would be happy. If I didn't have any friends, I'd be at a swing alone.
Oh.
Yeah. And how was the experience for your brothers and sister? You have one baby sister, right?
I am the oldest of four, so I have two younger brothers and a sister. And I think our experiences were kind of similar. I think mostly because we were all like living with the reality of having like undocumented folks in our family. And so we never really took vacations together. We never traveled abroad anywhere. A lot of, we were raised kind of the same. I don't think it was until we were teenagers that we started realizing the differences in our lived realities. Now that my brothers could apply for work, they could get a driver's license, they could register to vote. And these were a lot of the realities that I couldn't participate in when I was their age. So I couldn't really guide them through that or be a supportive older sibling. I also didn't qualify for federal financial aid to go to college, and that differentiated us in our, in our high school experiences. And my sister, she's a lot younger than all of us. So she's in high school now, and she's growing up in a very different family than the one that we had when we were little.
And she's in high school now?
Yeah, she's a high school freshman.
Wow.
I know, and I'm going to be 30 next year.
Oh, my God.
She's a baby.
Yeah. How do I say this? So, growing up, obviously, you must have felt like out of place from the lack of representation.
Yeah. I mean, it was complicated because I think growing up in Queens as an immigrant and a Colombian immigrant has its pros and cons, right? Like we have so many bakeries and restaurants and like centros, and it feels like there's folks here. But then at the same time, you're like being cautious of what you share with who and who comes to your house and how honest you are with people. And that keeps you from building solid friendships and connections, community. And so I would have friends that were Colombian immigrants, but were here on visas or had rich lives back in Colombia or had property, had parents that had money, had homes, and it was like the like further divisions within immigrant populations of people who had a class access and mobility and all these things that give you a leg up, and so I didn't really tell anybody that I was undocumented. Most of my friends were citizens, and it wasn't until I got to high school that I started to further understand that we were different and that I was going to be impacted by this difference. And so growing up, we had community at church, but it was still an isolated experience, especially around the holidays, or how honest and open you were with people, because at the core, you're still being cautious that any person can just cause you harm. So you don't want to be honest with them and be friendly with them.
So pretty much it sounds like fear definitely ran much of your life growing before you were able to come out, confidently that you're undocumented.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
How did you get into community organizing?
Funny enough, I think it was bound to happen. When I was in high school, I was involved in the Aspira Club in my high school, which was the Latino club that would raise awareness and be involved in the community. And when I was a senior, I heard about the New York State Youth Leadership Council through a conference that I had attended with my high school. And so when I graduated from high school, I applied for the scholarship program that they had for undocumented students. And I started to do my community service hours over the summer, and I just remained involved with them afterwards and learned about political organizing and mobilization as efforts to fight for justice and to have your voice be heard. So I think I was interested in community issues since I was a teenager. But it wasn't until I joined the YLC that I realized I could be a part of a political effort, even though I was undocumented, that I still had a voice.
That's awesome. How has that helped you?
I've been a part of this space for over 10 years now, and I think it has, changed the trajectory of my life. It has given me tools, power, knowledge, a space to use my voice when I was a teenager. Oftentimes teen voices are always silenced and excluded. And it created a sense of community and space where I didn't have one. I went from not knowing any other undocumented person to knowing way too many, and having, spaces for me to create and to lead.
That's awesome. It's almost like coming out confidently, you kind of found a brand new community.
Yeah, and a community that was right there, but it was invisibilized. I didn't even know I needed it. It was there.
Yeah. So let's talk about the documentary that you were in. How was that for you?
That was interesting too, and fun to make, but also scary. Mikhail and I connected back in 2012 when Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals was implemented under the Obama administration. And we were going to be making a short 5-minute clip on YouTube about community organizing in New York. And then in the process, I found out that I qualified for immigration relief, and a lot of other things happened that we ended up filming more for. So we filmed for about 2.5 years. And we ended up making this documentary, and not even on purpose, because it wasn't supposed to start off that way. And it aired in PBS in 2015. And we've been having screenings ever since.
Let me tell you, I cried. Oh my God.
When did you see it?
I saw it when I asked you, hey, how do I, how am I able to watch the film?
Yeah.
Because I didn't know that it came out in 2015. Like, I had no idea. But then in 2015, I also didn't have cable.
Yeah, it came out in 2015.
Wow.
I'm so glad you get to see it.
Yeah, oh my God, I was just texting my friends, like, you need to see this. It is important, especially because, like the media company that I pretty much work through, the head doesn't really have all the information, and I feel like it is important, to share this so that way we can all be educated how, immigration really works, how DACA really works, how people end up coming here undocumented, because it is not easy. And just coming here, how they say illegally, sometimes is your only option.
Right.
And it's people don't know how expensive it is.
Yeah, and the quote unquote legal process is not a reality for everybody.
Yeah, it's super expensive. You go back and forth, and sometimes these people at the embassy, it's like somehow you're always filling out forms on forms on forms, and then they tell you, oh, this isn't filled out correctly, you're missing XYZ, and then it's like you're going back and forth. Not only are you now wasting money on gas going back and forth, money that you don't have that can go through your papers, and then at the end, once they interview you, after you've spent all that money and then you're denied, then what do you do?
Yeah, and when you're trying to survive and barely have food or a place to live.
Yep. And then the war, the crimes, the drugs, and it's definitely not safe for young folks. So what do the parents have to do? They need to rescue their kid.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So in the film, when you spoke about your, what you've been through, the rape, how was that?
Yeah. Well, I had been assaulted when I was younger, and so I hadn't been raped, but it qualified me for a U visa. So a U visa is a visa that is for people who have survived the crime in the United States and reported it, collaborated with law enforcement and all of that. And so I was able to apply for a U visa instead of applying for deferred action for childhood arrivals, which was the initial program I was going to apply for. The difference being that the U visa puts you on a path to citizenship while deferred action doesn't. And so that was, it was really weird because it wasn't something that I was, planning on talking about. It's not something that I was organizing around. I had become involved in an immigrant rights movement, and I was fairly comfortable talking about being undocumented, but I think having talked about assault is a very different ballgame.
Yeah.
And so now I was going to be able to adjust through that. And the application process is just a very re-traumatizing one where you have to redisclose a lot of things and prove that you meet the requirements of victimization. And so it just, puts a lot of burden on the survivor to meet the criteria and the claim that they actually survived the crime that actually, happened to them and all these things. And so it was just a lot of re-traumatizing myself. And I was in my early 20s. I was, trying to move forward and not think about it. And so it just opened up a lot of things that I had tried to suppress for a really long time. With the added burden of needing this to adjust, right?
And how, what were your exact, feelings, finding out that something like this would be, the thing that led you to getting your citizenship?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I don't even know where to begin. It was really stressful process, and I couldn't even imagine that I would be where I am right now. I had reached a part in my life where I thought I was going to be undocumented forever, and so I was trying to figure out what that looked like for me. So it was a really challenging time.
Yeah, I think like the thing that hit me the most while watching the film was pretty much that, and how, like the feelings that came out of, not only getting approved, but that this would define the moment of the path that led you to citizenship. It was like really like heartbreaking for me too, because I had to pause it, and then I went to go look it up to see exactly what that meant, because I needed to read it for myself. And I'm just like there sitting there thinking like there has to be something more that leads undocumented people to citizenship, not just these things, like being assaulted, coming to a country as seeking asylum because you were part of like a crime or being forced to do something.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, our immigration system has a few forms of relief for undocumented folks, and all of them are rooted in violence, abandonment, human trafficking, assault. There isn't really much that is just like, oh, you want to be here, apply. It's rooted in violence, either here or abroad, from asylum to human trafficking to all those things.
Yeah. And then it's also like really, really sad that, the US can offer you these things when they are part to blame for the crimes that are happening in our homeland.
Right. And then we act surprised when people are forced to flee.
Yeah. Like my girlfriend's from El Salvador, and her mom was actually part of La Guerrillera in El Salvador that were fighting for the rights of the people from the regime that was going on over there that kept the people poor. But then once it started to get worse, because, like MS-13 actually started here in the US.
Yeah,
they were trained soldiers in the US that got deported back to El Salvador, and that is what they did. And then it's like the US goes into our homelands, take our resources, depletes us from our resources, but then wants to shut the door when we want to seek a better life.
Right.
In the film, your mom states that, it's time to get out of the shadows. And also how encouraging and powerful you are. How did that make your spirit feel?
I was really caught off guard. I don't know if you struggle with this too, but immigrant parents sometimes don't say things that they feel a lot.
Facts.
And so we fought a lot over me being involved in activist spaces, and it was always an argument. And so it was nice for me to hear these things. I was also surprised and, and wish I had heard them more, because I often felt like I was doing something wrong.
Yeah, because I can imagine that fear pretty much is what kept her, almost angry that you would have like the audacity to come out and, not only fight for yourself, but fight for other undocumented people.
Right. And, having the audacity to demand something better, I think is something that we would argue a lot about, because she felt like I needed to just stay quiet and be grateful for what we had. And I felt like what we had is not basic human rights, and this is not okay. And, it would be a lot of that back and forth.
Yeah, I can imagine. Like, I had to pause too, and I'm like, oh my God, like I felt like my heartstrings pulling when she said that, because you can also see, how nervous she was.
Yeah.
And I felt like, I think she wanted to show more emotion. Like, I saw her eyes get like really, really watery, and then I saw yours get really watery.
Yeah, I often want like that, more of that honesty and vulnerability with our parents.
Definitely, because I feel like there's a lot of things that parents and their firstborns definitely, need to talk about, because, parents have one experience as immigrants, but their children have a different experience as well. Not only watching their parents struggle, but adding to also that struggle, being their child, the sacrifices that they have to make for their child. But then the child also has now to pause their own childhood and become an extra adult when they shouldn't have to.
Right.
But it was almost like it's ingrained in us that because we are their children, we have to have the responsibility of helping them out.
Yeah, and feeling like, we depend on each other for survival here.
Yeah, that's definitely like really, really difficult. Like, I remember having a conversation with my mom where I really told her, how I felt and why I was so angry and resentful to her. And, like, I don't really like to have conversations like that with my mom, because, my mom is also a very Aries parent, and which means that their expression of remorse is very, very seldom. And when they do express remorse, it's like an almost backhanded remorse. So that conversation was, like, it was difficult, but when I saw her apologize and cry, I'm like, oh shit, this is it.
Yeah, wow. That's powerful.
Now, looking back, would you change anything?
No, I think I got involved at the perfect moment, and challenging my mom along the way was something that I don't regret.
Yeah. And I do want to touch base on the moment your mom came out confidently as well at the what is it?
At the coming out rallies.
Yep. How did that make you feel?
I didn't believe she was going to come, actually. So we had practiced at home. She wrote down her statement. We practiced a couple of times, and she signed up to participate, because that was an annual thing that we would do around March.
Mm-hmm.
And that day, I left early because I had to go to our office to pick up equipment and help set up.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't think she was going to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And she did. She got there later with my siblings, and was one of our first parents to do that.
How did that whole process make you feel? And helping her out with her speech and making sure that she was also comfortable.
Yeah, I was really proud of her, and I was moved by her bravery and how far she had come. Because this was 3 years after I first got involved, and so it was something that surprised me, but it moved me, and it moved a lot of people there too.
Yeah. Yo, I saw that. I must have cried throughout the whole entire movie, but that moment, oh my God. Like I just like wanted to hug your mom and wanted to hug you because, you know, I can imagine how like difficult that had to have been for both of you guys.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it really was. And I think that is also my favorite ending of the film.
Yes.
That it doesn't just end at my U visa, but at something bigger than that.
Yeah, because I feel like it definitely says a lot. Not only you like coming into your own and fighting for more, fighting for what you and the rest of undocumented people deserve, but fighting so hard against not only your fear but your mother's fear, to then have it end to your mom, you know, pretty much saying, you know, no more, like it is time for me to
Right.
stand up as well.
Yeah, and you start reaching a point where it just feels like I have to do something, you know, nothing is changing, nothing is happening. If I'm going to live in fear either way, then I might as well speak up.
Yo, I feel that. I definitely feel that. All right, guys, it's time for that One Piece. Not to be confused with the widely popular anime that we all know and love. This is that one piece of advice that you would give to a younger you. So let's start with you, Angy. What piece of advice would you give to a younger you?
What piece of advice would I give to a younger me? I think I would tell myself that it's okay, that I should forgive myself, and that it's okay to make mistakes, and that healing is not an end goal, but a process.
Yo, that's powerful. That's very, very powerful. Because, you know, like trauma definitely is something that runs our lives sometimes.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah,
carrying it on our shoulders. And, you know, not all of us have that same opportunity, that privilege to be able to seek help, find help.
Yeah. Yeah, and we start to feel like healing is an end goal we're going to do in like the next year or the next few months, and it's actually so much more than that.
Definitely. So guys, at this time, I like to highlight some dope people who are doing amazing work in our communities. Let's give a big year to Renata Flores Rivera. You can find her on IG at Renata Flores Rivera. Renata Flores Rivera was born March 20th, 2001 from Huamanca, Peru. Is a Peruvian singer made famous in Latin America by a viral Quechua cover of Michael Jackson's The Way You Make Me Feel. She's translated the song with help from Ada, her 72-year-old grandmother. In 2014, she participated in The Voices Kids Peru, a Peruvian talent show. Quechua is the native language of the Incas in South America, and like most of our indigenous language, finds ourselves in danger due to socio-political and economic factors. Renata Flores has decided to confront this issue and revitalize her roots through her songs in Quechua. After several years, Renata had released her own songs in the genres of pop and trap, such as Kawachik, Kanchik, Cha, Kiayata, Looking at the Same Moon, Tijeras, Scissors, and Miradas, Glances, to shed light on several social issues. Okay, guys, we've reached the end of this episode, but before I bid you all adieu, I want to pose a question to you all, mi gente. This week, I want to ask, Oye, mi gente, if you had to describe yourself in 5 words, what would they be? Piénsalo. Feel free to leave your insight and answers in the comment and review sections below. I want to give a big thank you to Angy for everything she's doing for our community, for her community. You give me strength and confidence as well as our community. You inspire us to look to a brighter future and not be afraid.
Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Like, you keep doing the work that you do because it definitely does not go unnoticed. You give people a lot of strength.
Thank you so much, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, Angy. Have a good one. All right, guys, that's it for this week's episode. Remember to follow us at OMG Podcasts on IG, where we are available on all your favorite streaming platforms. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a comment in the review section below. Also, follow us at Deacon Media on IG. And if you want to know more about the Deacon Media Network and what we do, you can check out the entire Deacon Media family on deaconmedia.com. Ciao.